Hey everybody, this is Perch. Something to consider. If you were reading comics in the 70s and the 80s, most of those readers typically looked at the 90s as a disaster. It was filled with gimmicks and polybag covers and cards and die cut covers and overuse of Wolverine, and everything got extremified, and Batman had spike shoulder pads. And I mean, it was this era where a lot of readers said, "This is it. It's all coming apart. We don't like this. It's bad." The publishers chased the gimmicks. Many of the critics said this is going to lead to a implosion, and they were mostly right. It did. It led to some bankruptcies and a lot of shops going away, and just it definitely did have a negative impact. No doubt about it. But the comic industry survived. It got into the 2000s. What's interesting is like the 2000s, I think a lot of people look at that and go, well, that was when things started coming back. We got Marvel Knights. You saw some of the, some indie comics really kind of found their footing after a lot of shipping delays out of Image. It started to come back. There was some good stuff in there, but there was also some terrible stuff. I mean, the 2000, the stuff that's been memory hold in the 2000s have really been memory hold. I mean, we joke about Chuck Austin's mutants can't get AIDS stuff, but yikes, there was still some terrible comics back then as well. But the reason I say this is that we're sitting here in 2021, 2022 now. What am I saying? It's 2022. And once again, I think a lot of comic fans are looking at things going, it's we're at the end. It's over. They've ruined it. It's a disaster. And I think there's two takeaways there, or three takeaways. One, the obvious, is that just like in the 90s, things most likely they will continue. In fact, not only will continue, but chances are they're going to get better. And the stuff that's really bad right now, the stuff that gets the full cringe, it's going to be hard forgotten. Nobody's going to remember a lot of this stuff years from now. And to kind of prove that, do you remember the some of the the Gabby Rivera, America Chavez? You probably remember that from videos you watched talking about that comic. But can you tell me anything about that comic other than what kind of panels showed up on social media or in videos? Can you tell me anything? You probably can't. Do you remember that they took the Grant Morrison villain and showed up to be a foe for America Chavez back in her dimension, and there was a multi-part storyline involving her? You remember that? I don't blame you if you don't, because it was forgettable. As a comic storyline, it didn't really accomplish much of anything, and it was very easy to just ignore, and people did. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, that's it's going to become a trivia question. Yes, Disney Plus is going to have an America Chavez show at some point. She's showing up in Doctor Strange 2, but you can see the pictures of that character right now. I mean, they're going younger. They're Disney-fying that character. They're not going to have the that version, the version that we saw in that comic, show up ever on the screen, which means that comic is going to be further just forgotten. It's going to go away. I don't, some might say you could take comfort in that really awful comics just kind of disappear over time. I have kind of a more negative view on that, which is, comics are very important, and we like to read them. We like to sell them. We like comics. So therefore, the fact that, hey, good news, a bunch of comics have just kind of faded from memory. They're forgettable and we can ignore them. I don't know. That sounds wasteful. I mean, in the nicest way possible, that's wasteful. But regardless, that's one thing to think about. Things are likely, because past have shown us that they're going to turn around, and the stuff that really seems bad today is going to be forgotten. And 20 years from now, it will. We tend to remember the best stories. We tend to forget the worst. The second thing to think about, and this is the one that I've been personally thinking about more and more lately, is that the comic industry seems to go through these phases where I don't know what the best way to put it. It the obvious answer is it disconnects from its own audience, where it doesn't. The fans want one thing, and the comic publishers are firmly convinced that they should deliver something else. And I think there's a good argument we're seeing a lot of that now. There's a definite disconnect right now between the two. But this has also happened before. Again, in the 90s and in the 70s, comic publishers, they got very convinced that something was a great idea. This was a comic they should market, put a lot of attention to, talk the most about, and it wasn't. Even Jim Shooter, a guy who I think did a great job as editor in chief, had a lot of great ideas that pushed the company forward. He was convinced that Dazzler was going to be a thing. That comic, that movie, that music, that triple play was going to be huge, and he pushed it. He pushed it hard, and it just didn't take. What I think you're seeing right now is a exaggerated version of that, a much bigger, much more in denial, if you will, version of that. And without going into it too heavily, I think social media is a big cause. Because in the past, when publishers would market something that didn't take with the audience, generally within, I don't know, less than a year, within half a year, there would be some signs, usually sales figures, or the reps who are doing distribution would say, "Hey, this isn't working. Turn it around. Do something else. You got to tinker with this because your big idea is not landing." But social media gives a positive echo chamber of support where it really doesn't exist. People on social media can say, "Oh my God, the best comic ever. This is the best comic in decades." And they do, because that's how people talk in social media. They talk in terms of absolute, extreme absolutes. Everything is the best ever or the worst ever. You've got comic creators right now having a debate about, we are definitely getting another Hitler in the next few years. And the whole world is coming apart. Climate change, things going to crack open. It is the worst times of ever. I mean, nothing is that extreme. And you know what? I should be fair. You have the same thing going the other direction. People have black pilled. What they don't understand is a black pill doesn't lean one way or the other. The black pill is a black pill. So if you find yourself saying things like the entire comic industry is going to burn down in a burning trash fire of just garbage, that's the same kind of extreme talk that really doesn't have any merit. It doesn't have any basis in reality. But this provides positive feedback to publishers. So publishers are sitting around and they're marketing something that just isn't going to work. If they're pushing an idea, they no longer have that, 3 to 6 month, wake up call going, "Hey, no, don't do this." They're still getting that data like, "Hey, these comics aren't selling," but then they turn around the other direction. They're getting data saying, "Hey, best comic in the world. Keep going. All you have to do is push it harder. The sales will come." And inside of the corporations, at least, certainly Disney and Warner Media, they're still addicted to the idea that this tweet got a ton of engagement. A lot of people liked it. Therefore, we're on the right track. Keep doing it. Because we're still living in the big lie of social media actually is a relevant pulse of what people want to like and buy. But right now, if you see what Marvel, you see what DC, you see what others push, you see what they put out into the market, it completely has all the signs of, a disconnect of a company going, "Hey, we believe that putting out these Marvel Voices comics, for example, these comics are this people love them. They're the best. We're getting great credibility. This is the right thing to be doing at this moment." Forgetting that very few of them are actually getting out into the market. The saddest part, and I've argued with people about this before, is if you really believe in social change, and if you really believe in your comic representation, all this stuff really matters in your comic, if you believe that this is the best possible vehicle in order to do that kind of stuff, then if you're selling insignificant numbers, if you're selling like 20,000 copies to a country of millions, of hundreds of millions of people, you aren't making a difference. I know it's been popular. This is the we won't keep score at the soccer games generation kind of logic coming into play here. But if it doesn't count if nobody hears it. If a tree falls in the forest, nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, if you're being measured on how big a sound it makes, then no, it doesn't make a sound. It doesn't matter. If you're rewarded, if your value is in people hearing the message, seeing the message, reading the message, but nobody actually reads it, no, you don't get brownie points for putting out the message anyway. Just, because. I think that if I'm fast forwarding to the next 10 years, the 2020 to 2030 kind of era, we've seen a lot of activism. We've seen a lot of people pushing concepts, pushing ideas in all sorts of media, including comics. But very little of it is sticking. Very little of it matters. And for a while, for the last couple of years, we have heard the message of it matters to you. It matters that you got out and did it. It's the thought that counts. But we are moving to a different way of thinking about this. We're moving to it's not the thought that counts. It's the actions that count. It's the results that count. I think this is a healthy thing. And you will start to see more and more people question some of the steps they make and say, if we're not landing the message, then we really have to we have to stop, turn around, and change course. And that is the likely future of where things start to change more for comics. Right now, I think the publishers are very much in the idea of, hey, we're getting good feedback on social media. The echo chamber is good. I said there was 3 points. This is the third point. I just slipped into it. And we're doing quote the right things. And the sales will catch up. The actions will bear fruit down the road. It'll be okay. I also think, kind of as a fourth, there is a healthy amount of cynicism that I think if you're working in any workforce, you're seeing a lot of right now, which is more and more people, because of COVID and everything that happened with over the last year. It's been it's been a pain in the ass for everyone, and so you'll have a lot of people that have slipped into a come in and punch the clock kind of mode. That they're out. They can't. They're mentally exhausted, and so they're really just I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to go home, and hope it's successful. If not, I don't know what to tell you. I'm out. I think we're seeing quite a bit of that right now, and I think you see a lot of that in comics. I think right now you've got creators openly talking about how much their job sucks and how painful it is to get back to it, and what a chore reading email is, and all the rest. And it's where mentally a lot of people are. Unfortunately, these pieces don't all work together. You work for a big corporation that, at the end of the day, wants to drive stock price higher. So results are going to matter eventually. ESGs or whatever people are, it's not. That's all nice and fun, but at the end of the day, stock price and profits do come into play again. In addition to that, the idea of, hey, we're putting out all this stuff. What's it for? Is a legit question that starts to get asked. And if you don't have a good answer about what impact you're making, then things are going to snap pretty quickly. I have optimism to where comics are going, because I think the thing that comic books really need is just some love, some attention, some consequence. Comics need to matter. If we're just putting out hundreds of comics, and they're just there because we need to fill the space, because we were told to put out 80 comics, so we put out 80 comics. That's not going to inspire anyone to do anything. There are some really great efforts going on in comics right now. There's some really good books being put out. The fact that they get kind of lost on the shelf with a bunch of just filler from people checking a box, that's not healthy. And at the end of the day, not not remotely sustainable. Anyway, just some thoughts here as we head into a new year. I don't know. Like I said, this is not a positive message. This is not a yay kind of message. It's not negative either. It's just kind of where things sort of feel like they're at. Thanks for listening.